We're here virtually in California's Central Valley, which has a Mediterranean climate. It's perfect for growing a wide variety of wine grapes, including Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays. Whether you're along the coast or in northern, central, or southern California, they all share the need for precious water resources. Water management is essential for wine grape growing, but fresh water is scarce across California and in other wine-growing regions. Wine growers are looking for ways to improve their irrigation management, and they're finding it in the unlikeliest of sources, up in space.
About 10 years ago, we were contacted by Gallo wineries that were interested in the remote sensing techniques we were developing for estimating plant water use. They recognized there's a need to quantify this at scales much larger than sort of the typical way that they go about measuring either soil moisture, or they have certain techniques using leaf level measurements of their stem water potential and other things to assess sort of vine vigor and vine stress. And they wanted to utilize remote sensing. They recognized this as a technology that could provide them spatial information at larger scales to assess multiple vineyard blocks.
That's Bill Kustas, a research hydrologist and distinguished senior research scientist at ARS's Hydrology and Remote Sensing Laboratory in Beltsville, Maryland. Kustas is part of a collaborative team called GRAPEX.
T-2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
The GRAPEX research program involves using satellites and even unoccupied area vehicles to identify vine water use and stress throughout a vineyard. Growers can use this data to determine if certain areas are getting too much, too little, or just the right amount of irrigated water.
With winemaking, there are certain periods of time during the grape development where they actually like to stress the vines to a certain level to get the desired sugar content and other compounds that make up the quality aspects in wine. A lot of that goes into the decision-making on irrigation amounts. So we began a project on assessing our remote sensing tools, and that involved going into the field, collecting data from leaf level all the way to block and vineyard scale level, and evaluating how our models worked and how well they worked in providing that type of information. After several years, they were interested to use it in part of their irrigation dashboard to assess how well it helped them in their irrigation scheduling. Some of the impacts of the work, they could see that they could potentially save water.
Technology has certainly come a long way. GRAPEX primarily uses data collected from the Landsat program, which is a partnership between NASA and the U.S. Geological Survey. Using the Landsat satellites, they can get resolution data within 30 meters.
We can actually see individual fields and variations within those fields. So that has been a major support for the project.
Kustas added that a public-private partnership is developing a way to combine Google Earth Engine with Landsat historical data to create evapotranspiration maps in near real time. Evapotranspiration occurs when water is lost from a surface through evaporation and transpiration. To create these maps, they have to overcome two hurdles. First, cloud cover can limit the ability to observe conditions on the ground. And second, the Landsat satellites only provide coverage every 8 days.
Now, we'd like it to be more frequent than that because evapotranspiration is quite dynamic and we don't know when they irrigate, for example. So to be able to better monitor, we want more frequent observations.
Fortunately, more satellites are going up in space, and there are more tools, such as thermal sensors, to gauge temperatures on the ground, as well as using unoccupied aerial vehicles. There are also small, less expensive satellites that orbit closer to the Earth, called smallsats or CubeSats. They can be deployed as a network of small satellites, which allows for more frequent coverage.
You could get almost a daily continuous coverage of surface temperature, which is key to our modeling strategy.
In addition to saving precious water, GRAPEX is helping growers improve their nutrient management. By knowing the moisture conditions in the soil, growers can better modify when they need to apply nutrients and minimize nutrient impact on water quality and usage.
Some of the things in the future we hope to do with GRAPEX is look into ways of improving sustainability through soil management, soil health. There's a lot of interest now in using cover crops in between vineyards and also using grazing animals to improve the soil health and carbon condition in the soil. Those factors look to improve water holding capacity and other aspects that can improve the sustainability in vineyards and in other perennial crops.
Kustas said one of the issues growers are dealing with more frequently are heat waves, and they're unsure how to manage their irrigation before, during, and after these long bouts of hot, dry conditions.
Something that's really important for a lot of the cropping systems out there is heat waves and how to mitigate the impact of heat waves and how best to do that to reduce that effect on plants. Some of the things they've tried to do with like overwatering during a heat wave, they're finding that perhaps that doesn't really address the plant's issues and that perhaps there needs to be a different approach where they either irrigate early before the actual heat wave happens, or we look at some other methods of like irrigating the areas where the plants aren't, but are providing a source of this latent heat that converts that heating effect into evaporation and reduces the impact of heat waves.
Heat waves tie into a bigger challenge as they increase in frequency and duration in many regions where wine grapes are grown. With more heat waves and drought expected in the future, wine growers may have to reimagine the design and layout of their vineyards.
Can we design vineyards, for example, to making them less susceptible to the impact of droughts and heat waves? And one of the discussions we've had is the row orientation and how you manage the vineyards in particular mitigate some of these effects. We're sort of going back to more of the canopy level or vine level sort of aspects to better understand how we might improve some of the management aspects that could mitigate some of these effects. How can you modify the design to improve the microclimate or how the actual plants themselves are being affected by the local conditions? Some of the measurements we make can help to better design in the future vineyards and other types of crops.
In addition to his research in California, Kustas is partnering with researchers at Cornell University in upstate New York to tackle a different type of irrigation issue, too much water.
It's actually too much water and some of the disease aspects that they have to deal with there. We're working on starting a project to determine how we might be able to better understand the conditions that are occurring there and how they promote or inhibit disease aspects in the vineyard in the New York State and other regions there. Hopefully next year, we'll be setting up an experiment site and doing something similar like we did in California.
Kustas is hoping his research in New York will have the same impact as it's had in California, and these tools from space will help wine growers deal with more erratic and extreme weather conditions that are predicted for the future.
So the impact has been the use or the technology in improving irrigation management and water management. And then secondly, the realization that in the future, there's going to need to be some changes in irrigation strategy to adapt to things like heat waves and extended droughts. I see that in the future, we'll continue to develop techniques that ultimately might fold into future management strategies that they'll do for addressing environmental impacts.
It's interesting to note that these sensor tools, as they become more sophisticated, could benefit irrigation management for growing other crops. And that could be a game changer for growers across the country.
The benefits are more than just to the wine industry. It's benefits to the ag industry in general, because with improvements in water use efficiency, that's going to be water savings. That's going to be improvements in water storage in the aquifers and the groundwater. That's going to lead to allowing for water to be more available to the community and to the environment, which is really important.
In our next episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the history of winemaking and test your grape knowledge with some trivia. What do wine grapes and donkeys have in common? Tune in to find out.